because they can no longer believe in the empty promises of the external road to salvation in any of its forms. The fact that you are a spiritual person proves that you have also come to adopt this outer path, or you would be happily or at least blindly following an outer religion. My point here is that there are many people on earth who have attained the spiritual maturity of seeing through the fallacy of the external path. Unfortunately, many of them have become confused and no longer know which path to follow, and others have become angry, rejecting our religion and spirituality. What I need you to do is to make the switch in consciousness whereby you realize that the outer path is deliberately designed by the forces of Antichrist in order to do two things. First, it can cause you to spend many lifetimes pursuing the outer path without getting closer to salvation, and most likely becoming embroiled in the ongoing struggle against people who belong to other religions. Secondly, as you begin to see through this illusion, it is not almost inevitable that you develop a mistrust against not only religion but even God. This usually leads to a deep and often unrecognized anger against God. You come to believe that God is unjust, since you have faithfully followed an outer religion and God still won't let you into the kingdom. I have earlier said that the concept of an outer path cannot lead to salvation. This demonstrates that this concept does not come from God, for God truly wants you to be saved and thus would never give you a path that cannot lead to the goal. As I said, it is God's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Do you understand what I just said? The subtle effect of these impossible expectations is that many spiritual people have actually come to doubt that God really wants to save them. As I have explained, many people in the world follow the outer path by believing that being a member of a particular church will guarantee their salvation. Most spiritual people have seen through this illusion, but instead they have come to doubt that it is actually possible to be saved, and the reason is that they have not critically examined the impossible expectation of perfection. In other words, some spiritual people have a subtle belief that being saved means becoming perfect, but because they also see the fallacy of seeking outer perfection, they think there is a gap that makes salvation unattainable. They think God requires them to be perfect and then makes it impossible for them to reach the goal. The switch I need you to make is that all of these expectations spring from an unreal concept of God, namely the external God that is so often portrayed by religion as an angry being in the sky. In reality, it is not God who is refusing to let you into His kingdom. It is yourself, or rather your ego, that is preventing you from entering the kingdom. The actual situation is quite simple. God has created a doorway to heaven that is 2 feet wide. Most people are carrying a beam, the ego, on their shoulders that is more than 2 feet wide. As long as you refuse to let go of the beam, you cannot fit through the door, for the beam hits the door frame and holds you back. God did not create the beam, you did. God cannot, because of the law of free will. God cannot, because of the law of free will, take the beam away from you. You have to step back and come to see the beam that you have not seen thus far. You have to realize that it is the beam, and not something outside yourself, that is preventing you from entering the door. and then you have to consciously and willingly let the beam go. When you throw down the beam, the person that descended from heaven, the conscious self, will easily fit through the door to heaven and ascend back to where you came from. You have already gone through the door coming from above, so the same being can surely go through the same door from the opposite direction. Do you see my point? All anger is, when it is stripped down to its naked origin, an anger against God. It all comes from an illusion about God and how God has designed the world, including the path to salvation. This illusion has created a set of expectations that can never be fulfilled, and this is what keeps you pursuing an impossible quest that can only add to your frustration and anger against God, thus making the beam in your eye longer and making it even harder to enter the doorway. The only way out is to see through these illusions, whereby your expectations will be replaced by an experience, an inner knowing of the reality of God. And when your expectations are gone, your anger will inevitably go with them, for both expectations and anger spring from a separation from God's reality. When you see the truth, you will be set free from both expectations and the anger they produce. We now see something very profound about anger. Anger springs from the expectations that spring from the illusion of separation. Yet, what is it about the illusion that you are separated from God that gives rise to anger against God? The illusion that you are separated from God is what gives rise to the further illusion that you need to be saved, that you are outside of God's kingdom, and that you need to fulfill certain requirements defined by some thought system in this world in order to gain entry into God's kingdom. And this entire mentality is what gives rise to the concept that you could fail to be saved, that you could become permanently lost, that you might be condemned by an angry God to spend an eternity in some kind of hell. And, of course, the entire concept of hell has been used very cleverly and persistently by the false teachers of Antichrist to generate fear in people, the fear of not being saved, the fear of eternal damnation and everlasting punishment. In other words, the very simple psychological mechanism at play here is that anger springs from fear. The fear is not being saved, is what gives rise to anger against God, because people feel that they have no way to take control over their own salvation, but must rely on a God who is seen as external to themselves. And precisely because there is a space between the external God and the self, or God would not be seen as external, there is room for an entire cornucopia of illusions that feed people's fear, and thus their anger against this external God who is seen as unknowable, distant, uncaring, unjust, arbitrary, and a whole host of other qualities. These are truly the qualities of the human ego that people project onto their graven images of God, worshipping them before the living God who resides where? Well, in the kingdom of God, within you, of course. In short, what I am saying here is that when you began to believe in the illusion of separation, a space was created between you, meaning your sense of self, your conscious self, and God. And in that space grew a host of illusions that make you feel trapped and at the mercy of a remote God who might or might not grant you salvation. It is precisely this sense of being stuck, of having no control over your own destiny, that has given rise to your anger against God. Traditionally, many religious people have attempted to deal with their anger against God by suppressing it, and most mainstream Christians are examples of this. However, suppressing something never works, for the more forcefully you suppress your feelings, the more forcefully you imprison yourself in the catch-22. You will never see a way out until you become willing to look at the beam, in this case, anger, in your own eye and deal with it consciously instead of suppressing it. So, suppressing your anger against God will never set you free from it. The only way to overcome anger is to look at it consciously, realize that it springs from an illusion, and thus set your anger free from the fear of not being saved. And what happens when you raise anger about fear? You discover that your anger is not actually anger, but a special brand of fierce determination, the determination to bring change, the determination that things cannot be allowed to go on and cause so much suffering, and this was likely the very determination that caused you to volunteer to descend into the material universe in order to raise up planet Earth and set your brothers and sisters in spirit free from the treadmill of suffering on which they have been trapped for many lifetimes. So, you descended to earth because of a positive desire, but when you became blinded by the illusion of separation, you saw no outlet for the positive desire, and thus the feeling behind it became lowered to what human beings call anger. Yet, once you raise that sense of anger about fear, you will be left with the original determination, and then you will be free to fulfill the reason why you originally came to this planet. Let me summarize the reality of why you find yourself in your current position, physically and in consciousness. You are here as a result of choices you made. You were not thrown into this world by an angry God, and your salvation from this world does not depend upon God or anything or anyone outside yourself, unless you allow it to do so. Your situation in this world and your salvation beyond this world depend exclusively on choices you make if you are willing to take full responsibility for yourself. And this, of course, is the problem. The sad fact of life on this planet is that over 99% of the people refuse to take full responsibility for themselves. And as long as they do not take responsibility, they have no way of escaping the sense of being victimized by other circumstances, other people, or God. Thereby, they condemn themselves to remaining on the treadmill that will only increase their frustration and anger against the world, other people, God, and themselves. The equation is simple. If you do not accept that your present situation is the result of choices you made, then you make yourself a victim of forces outside yourself, forces over which you have little or no control, thus making it impossible for yourself to do anything to improve your situation. The only way you can improve your life is to accept the reality that your situation is the result of your choices. For by doing this, you take back the power to change your life through your own choices. How do you change your life? By looking at the beam in your own eye, admitting that your past choices were not the most constructive, and then erasing your past choices by making better choices in the present. As I have already explained, one of the most subtle lies perpetrated upon humankind by the false teachers of Antichrist is that once you have made a bad choice, you are bound by it forever. Yet consider the reality that God gave you free will, that God wants you to be saved, and that God wants you to be saved through your own free choices. Based on what I said earlier, that God would not give you a path you could not walk, the logical conclusion is that God does not require you to be bound by your past choices. Only the devil will attempt to make you think you are bound by the past. God has given you the right to make any choice you want, which is what has given you the potential to descend into the illusion of separation. Yet, God has also given you the power to rise above that illusion, the valley of the shadow of death, by instantly replacing dualistic choices with choices based on the reality of the Christ mind. God does not want you to stay in duality any longer than you desire to stay there. God wants you to rise above duality by choosing life over death, by choosing the eternal life of the Christ consciousness over the mortal life of the consciousness of Antichrist. How do you overcome the ego? By finally accepting that you can walk away from it any minute and simply let it die. Of course, you can't walk away from the ego until you have consciously seen through and undone the choices that created the ego. For as long as those choices remain unchallenged, they will make you attached to the ego and make you think that if the ego dies, you will die. God will not make choices for you, nor will any member of the ascended host. It is only your ego and the false teachers of Antichrist who will make choices for you, or rather seek to manipulate you into situations where you cannot make free choices because you have a limited understanding. I have been building up to a point of helping you see that it is possible in the blink of an eye to fundamentally shift your attitude and approach to life away from feeling like a victim and then taking back your power to change your life. You can come to see that your expectations go so deep that they have distorted your sense of the purpose of life, making you believe that the purpose of life is to have something or to avoid something in this world. In reality, the purpose of life is growth. The growth in your consciousness that leads to full Christ consciousness. When you accept this reality, you see that there is truly no point in having expectations. The law of free will reigns supreme on planet Earth, which means you cannot control what other people do to you. Not even God can control what people do. However, what can you control is how you react to what other people do to you. And taking control over your reactions, do whatever happens to you on earth, is an essential part of attaining personal Christhood. Do you see what I am saying here? For millennia, there has been a false and a true path on earth, the broad way and the straight and narrow way. The broad way is to seek to control your outer circumstances, including other people. Countless people have spent lifetimes on this pursuit, but they have never found inner fulfillment, for you can never truly control your outer circumstances, which inevitably leads people into anger. In contrast, the true path has always been the path of self-mastery, namely of taking command over your inner circumstances, whereby you become able to choose the highest possible response to any circumstance you encounter. And you cannot attain this self-mastery as long as you hold on to expectations, for they will inevitably pull you toward a dualistic reaction. When you decide to follow the true path, you see that whatever happens in and opportunity to grow. I repeat, when you decide to follow the true path, you see that whatever happens is an opportunity to grow. For what is growth? True spiritual growth is not measured in your mastery over outer circumstances. True growth is measured in your mastery over inner circumstances, your self-mastery, which means that a person committed to growth knows that in order to attain self-mastery, it is necessary to expose anything in one's psychology that causes a reaction that is less than peace. Thus, if something happens that takes away your peace, it is an opportunity for you to see the beam in your own eye and take active measures towards removing it. In other words, those who follow the false path seek to control their outer circumstances so they never face situations that take away their peace, thus avoiding the exposure of the weakness in their own psyches. In contrast, those who walk the true path welcome the exposure of their own weakness, for it is only by looking at them that you can overcome them. Most people go through life with a set of expectations about what should and should not happen. Thus, they meet every situation they encounter with the question of whether it will follow or go against their expectations, whether it will give them pain or pleasure. A disciple of the living Christ has let go of such human expectation. Thus, he or she meets each situation with the attitude that it will provide an opportunity for growth, either by exposing something that needs to be overcome or by giving one the opportunity to demonstrate what one has already overcome. Pain or pleasure have become irrelevant, for every situation can only lead to a win by giving the opportunity to take another step closer to Christhood. For most people, life is a question of win or lose. But for disciples of the living Christ, life is a continuous string of victories, with each situation leading to growth toward the end goal of personal Christhood. Having talked about the need to accept full responsibility for your actions, we need to deal with the fact that many spiritual people have already done so, but that some have taken this too far by going into the blind alley of feeling guilty for their mistakes. In other words, by accepting full responsibility for yourself, you can overcome your anger against other people and God, but it can easily lead to anger against yourself. In fact, many spiritual people have expectations that cause anger against themselves when they are not fulfilled. The first thing you need to understand here is that the mind of Antichrist always operates with two opposite polarities. The false teachers are always seeking to keep you on this scale, where there are two polarities and a gray area in the middle that is a mixture of the two opposites. The last thing they want is for you to see through the illusions of duality and raise yourself above the veil of dualistic lies, above the scale. So you need to smarten up and realize that in this case the two polarities are: you are in complete denial of your own responsibility, always projecting that other people, God, luck, fate, or something else is responsible for your situation, and there is nothing you can do to change that. You accept full responsibility for your situation, but feel this makes everything your own fault. Thus, whatever happens to you is just one more straw of guilt and self-condemnation that will eventually break the camel's back. My point is that one extreme is accepting no responsibility and the other is blaming yourself for everything. You obviously need to rise above both, but not by going into the gray area in the middle. You need to find the true middle way of the Buddha by becoming untouchable by dualistic thinking. Let us begin by looking at a simple fact. You live on a planet with around 6 billion other people in embodiment. On top of that, there is a rather large number of disembodied beings who are attached to the earth in the emotional, mental, and identity levels. All of these beings combine their consciousness into what I call the collective consciousness, and this consciousness affects everything that happens on earth, even nature, the weather, and natural disasters. My point being that there are many occurrences that might affect you by which are not directly caused by you, meaning that while you take responsibility for yourself, you do not take responsibility for everything that happens to you, for much of it is the result of the mass consciousness or other beings exercising their free will. Should I have felt guilty for my being crucified, or should I reason that I did exactly what I needed to do, namely expose the fact that many people are willing to kill the living Christ instead of changing their consciousness? The next step is to realize that God gave you free will, meaning that God gave you the right to experiment with your co-creative abilities. God attaches no guilt or blame to this process, for God has set up an entirely mechanical system that returns to you any energy impulse you send out, thus making you experience what you co-create. In other words, what I am saying here is that the entire consciousness of guilt and blame that is associated with so many religions on earth did not come from God. It came entirely from the false teachers who are seeking to trap humankind in the duality consciousness. The lie is that once you have made a mistake, you should feel guilty and blame yourself, which only drives you deeper into duality, making it harder for you to use even your mistakes as stepping stones for growth. In God's reality, there is no such thing as a mistake, and thus no need to feel guilty. Any action is simply an experiment. It generates an energy impulse, and the impulse will inevitably be returned to you by the cosmic mirror. The returning impulse will have one of two effects. If the impulse you send out was based on love, the returning impulse will magnify your life. If the impulse you sent was based on fear, the returning impulse will diminish your life. It is exactly what I described in my parable about the talents, where those who multiplied their talents had more given to them, whereas the servant who buried his talents in the ground out of fear had it taken away from him. So the real question is whether an action will multiply or diminish your own life. If you find that you receive a return from the universe that diminishes your life, you must reason that in the past you have sent out impulses based on fear. Thus, you can examine your consciousness and expose any elements of fear in your psyche. As you remove those elements by replacing them with the reality of the Christ mind, you will begin to send out impulses based on love, and in time they will inevitably be returned to you. Let me use a crude analogy. Imagine you are playing one of these mechanical games where you use a spring to propel a metal ball into the machine and then use various dials and switches to control the ball's path and score points. This is completely mechanical device, so there is no need to feel guilty for what happens to the ball. You are simply experimenting, and the ball's path is determined by mechanical factors. If you flip the right switch, you will score points, and if you don't, you will not score points. Well, while life is not entirely mechanical, my point is that God has given you the right to experiment with your free will, and He has given you a somewhat mechanical environment in which to do so. Thus, there is no need to feel guilty for your experiments. The real question is what the outcome of an experiment is, namely, whether it multiplies your life or diminishes it. If you realize that the impulses you have sent out diminish your life, you don't need to feel guilty. You simply need to change the impulses you are sending out by changing your consciousness. The problem is that most people have been seduced by the false teachers into believing that they don't need to change their consciousness. They don't need to remove the beam in their own eye or even look at that beam. They have been sold the lie of the outer path, which promises that they can escape the consequences of their actions, their sins, without changing the cause of those actions, namely the psychological condition that must precede any action. Most people believe in this lie, whereas the disciples of the living Christ are doing everything they can to remove all traces of that lie, however subtle, from their consciousness. This, of course, involves seeing every situation as an opportunity to expose some element of the duality consciousness and thus take another step closer to the total freedom that is the Christ consciousness. My point is that life is an experiment. Your outer circumstances are to a large degree a reflection of what is going on in your consciousness. If you don't like what is coming back to you from the cosmic mirror, don't feel guilty about it and don't blame other people, God, or yourself. Simply change what is in your consciousness, and the cosmic mirror will inevitably reflect back your new inner reality in your outer reality. Do you see what I am really saying here? You are a co-creator, and you grow in your ability to co-create only by experimenting. The false teachers are seeking to use your past mistakes to get you to shut down your co-creative abilities by losing your willingness to experiment. Yet, the only true way out of the duality consciousness is to keep experimenting. Only you seek to learn from every experiment and increase your Christ discernment so you can perform better experiments. As I have said before, you cannot overcome a problem as long as you are trapped in the same state of consciousness that created the problem. The problem is not your experimentation. The problem is that for a long time you have exercised your co-creative abilities through the filter of the duality consciousness. The way out is not to stop experimenting, but to keep experimenting while reaching for the discernment of Christ, so you can begin to base your experiments on reality rather than unreality. When you accept that life is an experiment and embrace experimentation as the only way out of limitations, you can let go of all expectations, including the expectations about self that lead to anger against self. For you do not need to expect that you should have been perfect from the beginning. You are an experimenter, a researcher, and you are not required to be perfect. You are here to learn by continuing to experiment until you begin to see what multiplies and what diminishes your life. So keep experimenting and don't let anything in your world or in your psyche cause you to shut down your willingness to try. For, as I have explained, the death consciousness becomes a closed circle, a self-reinforcing downward spiral, and the only way out of it is to try something new, to reach for something that is not colored by the illusions of the dualistic mind. Consider the parable about the talents. The servants who multiplied their talents did so out of love, whereas the servant who buried them in the ground did so out of fear, the fear of loss. The false teachers are seeking to use your past mistakes to generate a fear of loss that causes you to stop experimenting. Yet it is not your failed experiments that keep you out of heaven, for even a failed experiment can be used to learn a lesson. It is only when you stop experimenting that you are keeping yourself out of heaven. So far, your experimentation with free will might have taken you away from heaven, but the reason is that your experiments were based on the illusions of the mind of Antichrist. The way out is not to stop experimenting, but to increase your discernment so you can begin to base your experiments on the reality of Christ. It is true that you have experimented yourself away from heaven, but it is equally true that the only way to overcome this condition is to experiment yourself back into heaven by making better experiments, which means experimenting based on the reality that all life is one, rather than the illusion of separation. So let us now get to the core of the problem. You are most likely a spiritual being who volunteered to come into embodiment on earth in order to help bring God's kingdom into manifestation on this planet. You did this out of love, but after you started embodying on this planet, your love and the gift you came to bring was rejected and most likely ridiculed and degraded by some of the more recalcitrant life streams on this planet. This has put you in a catch-22, and let me explain the nature of it. On the one hand, you are not here for your own enjoyment. You are here because you know this planet is far below the level of the kingdom of God. Thus, you know things need to improve on this planet, and you also know that the only way to manifest such improvement is through the spiritual light and wisdom from a higher realm, which is precisely what you came to bring. Yet you have experienced over and over again that both the light and the truth is rejected by a majority of the people on this planet, and thus you cannot see how there can ever be an improvement. Because of this, you have built up a certain level of frustration that can easily cross the line to anger. You might not fear for your own salvation, but you fear for the salvation of other people or the planet. My point for this entire discourse is to show you that this frustration is a product of the consciousness of separation, which has allowed fear to creep into your being. There are many variations of this fear, such as the sense of urgency that the world might come to an end, or that there is a timeline that needs to be met. Now, I'm not saying that there is no timeline, for everything evolves according to cycles. However, let me make it very clear that the world will not come to an end. Thus, I want to make it very clear that disciples of the living Christ need to put behind them the fear of the world ending. When I was in embodiment, I was to some degree affected by this fear, for I did have a concept of the end of the world. However, the reality behind this is that for certain life streams, their opportunity to choose life over death will eventually come to an end on this planet, meaning that the world, or rather their opportunity to embody on earth, will come to an end. However, this is not your responsibility, as it is all up to the law of free will. My point is that you need to develop an uncompromising respect for free will. You respect the free will of other people to the point where, if they want to destroy themselves, or even if a majority want to destroy this planet, you allow them to have that experience. You also respect your own free will by refusing to allow other people's rejection of your light and truth to deter you from letting your light shine and from shouting your truth from the housetops. What I am saying here is that there is only one way out of the catch-22 of frustration and discouragement. You need to decide that you are not here to change other people. You are here only to share your light and truth for the purpose of giving other people the option to choose the light, which they do not have until they experience your light and truth. Yet you leave it up to their free will whether they will accept or reject your gift. For you are not here to make them accept your gift. You are only here to offer that gift. I need you to make the switch in consciousness that you are here to be like the sun. The sun is constantly shining its light on planet Earth, and it is unconcerned about what people do with that light. Do they accept it or reject it? Well, either way, the sun just keeps shining, and that is what you need to do as well. The role of the living Christ is to be the open door through which the light and the truth of God can shine into this world. It is not the role of the living Christ to get people to respond to that light in any specific way, for that is up to their free will. So the living Christ is willing to allow other people to do whatever they want with the light, whereby the light becomes either their awakening or their judgment according to their own choices. You see, when you become the sun that always shines, you become the sun, S-O-N, the Son of God, the living Christ, whether you are in a male or female body. By going through this transformation, you will raise your anger above fear, whereby it will return to its natural God quality, namely what we might call an unwavering determination and uncompromising refusal to accept status quo, which is precisely the driving force that caused the Creator to create the world of form and design it as a world that cannot stand still, but is always transcending toward the ultimate goal of becoming the kingdom of God. The living Christ never accepts any conditions on earth as permanent or unchangeable. He or she holds the vision that things will improve, but in doing so, the living Christ is non-attached, and I mean completely non-attached, to the choices of other people. That is why the living Christ is absolutely determined never to shut off the light and truth, but to always remain that open door. Do you see the importance of this? Far too many spiritual people have gone through the stage of frustration and have then become seduced by the subtle lie that if the world does not want their light, they should simply hold it back. They should work on themselves, withdraw from the world, and never rock the boat. It is extremely important for you to understand that this mentality is engineered by the forces of Antichrist, specifically to prevent the most spiritual people from making a difference on this planet. It is engineered to make you stop shining your light thereby effectively leaving this world in the control of the forces of Antichrist. I need you to recognize that anger stems from a positive quality that is needed for Christhood, namely, the unwillingness to accept status quo as unchangeable. Thus, you will do no good for God's cause if you allow yourself to withdraw from the world, to withhold your light and truth. Instead, I need you to awaken to your Christ potential and lock into your original determination for coming to this planet, so you will not let any conditions in this world, including the conditions in your own psyche, focused in your ego, prevent you from being that open door for the light and the truth that will, if it is allowed and tried, change this world. You see, when you believe in the illusion of separation, you believe that the world has to be saved by what is already in the world. And since a deeper part of your being recognizes that this is impossible, you feel again that you and the world are in a catch-22. Yet nothing is impossible for the light and the truth of God. They can and will change the world. However, the light and the truth of God can only work when they are allowed to enter this world. And this will happen only when a sufficient number of people decide to become the open doors by becoming the living Christ in embodiment. I came to earth 2,000 years ago precisely to demonstrate the path to personal Christhood so that others could follow in my footsteps and do the works that I did. So far, only very few people have dared to do this, which is why there is still so much suffering on earth. You have the potential to change the equation by becoming the open door. Will you join me so that my example can bear fruit? As the exercise for this key, I need you to work on forgiveness, forgiving all other people, forgiving God, and forgiving yourself. In order to do this, you need to understand an essential truth about forgiveness, a truth that even many religious and spiritual people have not understood. Many people think that when someone has harmed you, you should hold on to negative feelings toward them, and when you have harmed others, you should hold on to negative feelings toward yourself. What I have told you here is that everything in this world is energy, meaning that your thoughts and feelings are energy impulses. When you have a thought or generate a feeling, you send out an energy impulse. In many cases, it will last only seconds, but when you hold on to a negative feeling, you are constantly sending out an energy impulse. This will generate a continuous impulse, which is what scientists call an energy field. In other words, when you hold a grudge against a person who has harmed you, you create an energy field between your mind and the other person's mind. Take note that it does not matter what the other person has done to you. You are the one creating the energy connection, and I can assure you that energy can flow both ways over such a connection. I can also assure you that by allowing such an energy connection to persist, you open your energy field to influx from the collective consciousness. When you consider how much non-forgiveness, anger, and hatred has been generated on this planet, you should be able to see that you do not want to do anything to tie your personal energy field to that collective momentum. What I am saying here is that when you hold on to negative feelings toward any person, you open yourself up to an influx of energy, whereby the other person and the planetary force of Antichrist can exercise power over you. The more intense your feelings, the more likely that the force of Antichrist can agitate you into taking actions that will only continue the dualistic struggle and thus tie you to that struggle. There are many people who have been trapped in such a spiral or retaliation and revenge for many lifetimes. Obviously, you cannot be a disciple of the living Christ as long as you are tied into such momentums. Likewise, there is a planetary momentum of anger against God and one of anger against oneself. When you hold a negative image of yourself, you make yourself vulnerable to the planetary momentum. In reality, you need to look for the beam in your own eye that causes you to hurt other people. When you have discovered and removed it, you need to accept that you are forgiven, and thus there is no need to hold on to negative feelings about what you have done in the past. You need to accept that God has forgiven you, and you need to forgive yourself. How do you forgive? Well, most people find it hard to forgive because they think forgiveness, as everything else, should be tied to conditions on earth. In other words, they think that if someone has harmed you, that person needs to change before he or she deserves forgiveness. Or they think there needs to be some kind of justice before there can be forgiveness. Yet this is a completely dualistic view of forgiveness, and it springs from the mind of Antichrist. Take a look at these sayings. Quotation. But I say unto you, that you resist not evil, but whosoever shall smite thee on thy right cheek, turn to him the other also. Matthew 5:39. Then came Peter to him and said, Lord, how oft shall my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? Till 7 times? Jesus said unto him, I said not unto thee until 7 times, but until 70 times 7. Matthew chapter 18. What I was really saying here is that you need to be in a state of perpetual forgiveness, a state of mind in which you never allow yourself to feel that you have been violated by others, and thus they are forgiven even before they do anything to you, which means you must overcome all expectations. Consider that forgiveness is normally seen as a selfless act that sets other people free. However, in reality, it can be seen as an act of enlightened self-interest because it is actually setting yourself free. What I told you above is that as long as you have not forgiven, you are maintaining an energy connection between yourself and the other person, a connection that also ties you to the collective consciousness. So, by not forgiving, you are actually hurting yourself. Non-forgiveness is like climbing a mountain with a heavy boat anchor dragging behind you. My point being that you will only make it harder for yourself to walk the spiritual path if you hold on to non-forgiveness. When you let go and forgive, you will set yourself free to make much faster progress on the path. The problem with non-forgiveness is that it can be characterized by the old concept that 2 wrongs don't make a right. Someone else is in an unbalanced state of mind and does something to hurt you. You, or rather your ego, then uses that unbalanced act as a justification for going into an unbalanced frame of mind. The ego thinks this is a natural reaction and that you are only doing what is just or necessary in order to pay back the other person and bring justice. Yet in reality, you are harming yourself by putting yourself permanently in an unbalanced state of mind. And how can you hope to bring justice while you are in the same frame of mind as the person who harmed you. So, how do you forgive? There is only one way. You must let go of all the conditions created in this world and forgive unconditionally, which is precisely what I am telling my disciples to do back then and today. There is only one form of forgiveness, unconditional forgiveness. You do not need to have another person change before you can forgive that person. You need to have yourself change so you can see that forgiving is enlightened self-interest, because it sets you free from any energy ties to people in an unbalanced state of mind. You see, when someone hurts you, that person will make karma, and what the person sent out will inevitably be returned to him or her by the cosmic mirror. That is why you have the saying, quotation, "Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, said the Lord." Romans 12:19. God has set up a mechanical law that returns to every person what that person is sending out. This is ultimate justice that no one can escape. So you have no need to worry about bringing other people to justice. You can leave that up to God's law, which is unfailing. So your concern should be your own growth, and in that respect, let me make it clear that when you go into a negative frame of mind because another person hurt you, you will also make karma, for the cosmic mirror can only reflect back to you what you are sending out. Do you now begin to see a deeper meaning behind my statement to turn the other cheek? If someone harms you, that person makes karma. If you take revenge or even hold a grudge, you too make karma. But if you turn the other cheek in unconditional forgiveness, you will make no karma from the situation. On top of that, your unconditional reaction will serve as the other person's judgment, whereby that person's opportunity to harm others will actually be shortened. On the other hand, when you go into a negative reaction, you engage in the dualistic struggle, and that cannot serve as the judgment of others. It only serves to perpetuate the struggle. My point is that you have a decision to make over the next month. You need to decide whether you will forgive unconditionally, meaning that you forgive all people who have ever harmed you. Forgive God and forgive yourself. If you will forgive unconditionally, then I welcome you to the next level of discipleship under the living Christ. If you will not forgive unconditionally, then you are not yet ready to become a disciple of the living Christ, and I ask you to withdraw from this course and return only when you have forgiven unconditionally. Exercise for Key 6. To help you forgive, I ask you to continue the pattern established of giving a rosary and then writing down what comes to you in terms of people you have not forgiven, things for which you hold anger against God, and reasons for not forgiving yourself. Then examine those reasons and see how they are holding you back, creating an impenetrable wall between yourself and me. You simply cannot enter the wedding feast and have your soul become the bride of Christ until you have put on the wedding garment of unconditional forgiveness. I also need you to monitor yourself for any elements of anger in your being. When you feel the vibration of anger, Tune in to the Dhyani Buddha, Aksobhya, who is the Buddha that is the antidote to anger and hatred. His form of wisdom is the mirror-like wisdom, which you might envision as a completely calm mountain lake that is like a mirror undisturbed by anything in this world. You may also think of it as a mirror that will, if you are open to seeing it, give you a mirror image of what is real and unreal, thus empowering you to discern and avoid being angered by anything unreal. If you ask the Buddha, he will reflect back to you what is unreal in your own consciousness. For I can assure you that nothing real will cause anger in the conscious self, only in your ego, and thus, when you see what is real and unreal, you have the opportunity to unmask the ego as it responds with anger to that which is real. Thus, you need to build a habit of monitoring yourself for anger, and when you feel it, tune in to Akshobhya and recite